Welcome back to the Friday Five for February 3rd, 2023. My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm an estate planning and business law attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota and New York City. Let's look at 5 questions from the week, some quick questions that you may have also questioned in the past, and give you some quick answers. Now, before we get started, it was -15 when I got up this morning, so it was a rough one to get the boys out to the bus, but hopefully we got some warm weather on the weekend. So if you're up here in Minnesota or in the Midwest, or actually if you're out east where the weather's heading after this, I hope you stay warm this weekend. Question number 1 was actually submitted just for this episode, and that question from a watcher was, what happens to a mortgage loan when a deed is transferred to a trust, and can the mortgage company require additional action from me, like paying the debt sooner? So this is a common situation that comes up when I have clients who have real property and sometimes even rental property that they want to move into a trust, and they're concerned about, if we move it into the trust, what happens to the original mortgage. So depending upon what method you use versus a trust or an LLC will depend on what your mortgage company will do. If you're going to move it into an LLC, chances are you need to check with that mortgage company first to make sure they'll let you make that transfer. However, if you're going to move it into a trust, there's normally not going to be a problem. What you're looking for in your mortgage is essentially the due on sale clause, meaning that is the mortgage company going to treat that transfer of the property from your name into the trust to then trigger that provision in the mortgage and make you pay off the mortgage. So again, if you're going to move it into a trust, this normally won't be an issue. However, with all of these kinds of situations, my first advice is always check with your mortgage lender first. Make sure they understand what's happening and make sure everything is clear so you don't run into the kind of problem where they try to claim that you have to pay off the mortgage if you're moving the property into a trust. Question number 2 this week, what happens if my ex-spouse dies without a will? So in this case, we had a client who gave my office a call. Now, they've been divorced from their spouse for about 10 years, and they found out that their spouse had died. And the question was, are they going to be inheriting anything from that ex-spouse? Do they even have to do anything? And so this client was concerned that because they were the ex-spouse, that they were the ones who were going to have to take over the personal representative role for the estate. And actually the answer is no, you don't have to. And in this case, the way the law is laid out, at least in Minnesota, that ex-spouse is not even the closest family member at this point. There was children who are alive from the person who died. And frankly, it's those children who should be stepping into the role and dealing with the estate, not necessarily an ex-spouse who really had no connection. Now, of course, what was happening here was some creditors were reaching out to this prospective client and saying, well, you were the spouse, so we need you to make these payments. Well, first of all, the debts all arose after the parties had been divorced, so the person who called my office was not actually on the hook for these debts. They're a debt of the person who died, and it's their estate who has to figure it out. Now, it may be that the ex-spouse is the right person to step in and help out, but you're not under an obligation to be the personal representative for your ex-spouse. Question number 3, do I have to leave equal inheritances to my children? So this came up with a client who we've been working on an estate plan for, and they have 3 children. And 2 of them they're very close to, 1 they haven't heard from in almost 20 years. And even of the 2 who they are close to, 1 is taking care of this client on a daily basis, helping her out, helping her get through life, and is contributing to the household in that way. And so the client wanted to know, how should they structure their will to recognize the 3 different stages she has with her children. The one who's really helping her out, the other one she's close to but doesn't see that often, and the third one who's refused to speak to her for over 20 years. And their concern was, doesn't the law require that I give equally to all 3 children? So if you die without a will, the law will likely say all 3 children are going to inherit equally because that's the way the statute's written. But this is a good reason why it's important to create an estate plan if you have this kind of situation, because you can leave whatever you want in your estate to these different members of your family. So you can leave some more to the child who's helping you out. You can leave some to the child who you speak to every now and then, and you don't have to leave anything to that child who hasn't spoken to you in 20 years. Now, by doing that, you're probably going to create some kind of a rift between your 3 children when the one who hasn't spoken to you in 20 years finds out you're gone. However, that's not really your problem at that point. It's going to be up to you and how you want to divide your estate. Question number 4 this week, should I set up my LLC for my rental property before I transfer the deed over to the LLC? Well, obviously, if you're going to transfer the deed into the LLC, you'll need to have an LLC set up to receive the property title. However, as we're looking at in question number 1, my recommendation is don't set up the LLC until you've confirmed that your mortgage lender will let you do that transfer. So what we're running into is, if you're working with a servicing company that's consistently selling your mortgage on to other companies, they're much less likely to allow you to move that property into an LLC than if you've been with one bank for 20 years and you've been making your payments every month and you're in good standing. Those kinds of situations, your mortgage company is more likely to allow you to transfer that property by deed into your LLC. Question number 5 for the week: do I have to tell my tenants if I move the property into an LLC? So obviously the same prospective client reached out to me about this issue. So first we looked at whether, or what would be the timing for when to move the property into the LLC and set up the LLC. But the second part of the question was, what do I tell my tenants? So in this case, the prospective client has had people renting the property for years. It's been in their name and they want to move it into the LLC. And they want to know, should they let the client know? Well, you do want to let the client know, because you're going to want to set up a new bank account for your LLC. And in that case, the payment should be going not to you anymore, but it should be going to the bank account for the LLC. And this gives you tax advantages and allows you to create and use all those advantages of the LLC. And the simple way we can do this is by creating an assignment of the lease from your name individually to the LLC. And usually all that means is giving a short notice to your renter that now the LLC is the owner of the property, and instead of making the check out to John Smith each month, it should be made out to 123 Main Street LLC each month. The tenant shouldn't necessarily have the right under the lease to object to this. They should just make the payment wherever it's required. But you also want to check the terms of your lease that you've created to make sure that you're allowed to assign the lease to the new LLC. And if not, if the renter's got like a month left on their lease and you're going to have a new renter come in, just make sure when that new renter starts up that they are signing their lease with the LLC and they make all payments to the LLC. So those are 5 questions from this week. One of them submitted by someone who's a viewer, and then the others from consultations this week. Again, it's been really cold out here in Minnesota, so wherever you are, I hope you're staying warm and you have a great weekend. There'll be a link in the description if you'd like to ask questions like our questioner did for future episodes. And if you found this video helpful, I'd love it if you hit the like button below, and you can subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. And so stay warm, have a wonderful weekend.